What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero here at Lambeau Field shortly after the Vikings' 45-7 loss to the Green Bay Packers. As you look at the worst defeats in franchise history, I think it contextualizes a little bit exactly how badly things came apart in this game. Second biggest loss, matching the second biggest regular season loss in team history, the only one worse back in 1984 under Les Steckel, which was, of course, the worst season in Vikings history. One thing that I think that is particularly disturbing, and there's all sorts of personnel reasons to be thinking about whether or not the Vikings are going to be able to compete anytime in the near future for a division title, not just with the Packers, but with the way the Lions seem to be rising and some of the positive things that the Bears continue to find ways to do. But when you start hearing guys talk about the Packers came to play and we didn't, when you start hearing rumblings behind the scenes that maybe some guys came back from the bye week and just didn't have the right mindset, weren't able to get up for this game, that's disturbing. Those are the sorts of things that come back to Leslie Frazier's desk. And you wonder, after the Carolina game, and I remember what stood out to me was the fact that you had guys like Adrian Peterson and Percy Harvin and Jared Allen. You were getting the A game from those guys. They continued to fight. But to show up out here, national TV, a Monday night game, a division rival, an unbeaten team, and to do nothing, and to just not make plays, to not seem to have any sort of edge or juice to you. Yeah, giving up a punt return for a touchdown right off the bat doesn't help. You're down 7-0 before Aaron Rodgers even takes the field. But that's not an excuse for the way the Vikings played. They didn't do anything well in this game. They played poorly on special teams, obviously with the punt return, taking a couple of penalties, 10 penalties for 80 yards overall in this game. Christian Ponder's line doesn't look good, 16-34, 190 yards, took 3 sacks, threw a bad interception, threw a couple other balls that Charles Woodson almost hauled in, but again and again, this is a Packers defense in the secondary that was 31st in the NFL in pass defense coming into this game. They had all sorts of breakdowns last week against San Diego. The Vikings weren't getting open. The receivers were not getting open. At times, yeah, there's guys out there, but there were a number of times where I was focusing specifically on what was happening in pattern. And again, you just didn't see the Vikings receivers getting any sort of separation. They're really shorthanded on the perimeter right now. But you'd hope that guys are going to find ways, particularly when plays break down. They blitzed Christian Ponder a ton. There were times where he broke the pocket and he's looking down the field. There were guys stopping on routes. There were people just not doing a whole lot to wiggle free. Guys who would run their initial route and then just not really be running the scramble drill that we saw the Packers run so well on one of those late touchdowns. There's just such a disparity between these teams. And basically the point of what I'm saying here is you get 7 games left in this season. Ultimately, is it better for the Vikings' long-term future if they lose some of these games and get a high draft pick? Of course, but if you lose the rest of the games, or if you lose close to the rest of the games, if you only finish with 3 or 4 wins, now I think you're going to have a lot of guys beginning to question, how long is it going to take this thing to turn around? You've got some guys headed for free agency. You've got some veterans who are under contract who might be starting to look around and wonder exactly what direction things are going. In the end, players have to put it on themselves. They have to put in the work, and they need to come out with the energy level and the effort level that it takes to at least stay on the field with the Packers. The Packers are the best team in the NFL. Losing 45-7 to them is slightly less shameful than losing 45-7 to anybody else, but you can't get wiped off the floor. Brett Favre may be gone. He was a guy who during Vikings-Packers week the past 2 years got guys up behind the scenes, and people did have that sort of charge put into them. Leslie Frazier is a very even-keeled guy. There's not really a whole lot of guys. Ryan Longwell's not going to stand up and talk about the Green Bay Packers. There just was a placid nothingness about the entire thing tonight. In the locker room, it was the same thing. On the sidelines, and then listening to the whispers behind the scenes, there were some people who did think that this might be coming and that this might end up being an ugly performance. Now the Vikings have to come back on a short week, play an Oakland Raiders team that seems to have a little bit of a spark in them now. And they have a long week to prepare, too, after playing on the Thursday night game last week. How are the Vikings going to come back in that one at the Metrodome? Because guess what? Christian Ponder's first NFL start assuaged the booze temporarily. People could look at Ponder and look at the young Vikings and say, okay, this is what we're going to latch on to. But I think after a loss like this, the grace period's over. And if the Vikings struggle early on against the Raiders next week, guess what? Boo Birds will be back. I'm headed back on a flight in like 6 hours here, so I should probably get out of the press box. But full coverage at 1500ESPN.com. See ya.